Hi everyone, my name is Paulos. So today I want to talk about the term rate. So the term rate gets thrown around a lot in Flesh and Blood. People will say, "Whoa, that's above rate," or people will say, "Well, that's below rate," or "No, that's just on rate." So I knew a bit like what this means, but not precisely, but I had like a feeling for it. But one time I was thinking about Flesh and Blood, and I was like, what is the average rate of a card? Like, if you could put a number on a card, what would that card be? What would that number be? So I followed a discussion with some friends, and in the discussion I found out a really cool thing about Flesh and Blood. And this thing is an equation, and most of the time that equation comes down to 8. So the equation is as follows. You add the attack, the defense and the pitch value of a card, and you subtract the cost of the card. So a good example, Raging Onslaught. You have 7 attack plus 3 defense is 10, plus 1 pitch is 11, minus 3 is 8. So if you add all these values of the card together, you should get 8. Now this makes sense in Flesh and Blood. Let's go to the blue one. Alright, 5 plus 3 is 8, plus 3 is 11, minus 3 is also 8. So this makes sense. This card is better at pitching, less good at attacking, but it still comes down to 8. So this is pretty balanced. Now you also have things like Go Again. So here you have the attack value of the card 4 plus 2 plus 1, so that's 7. Wait, that's 7. But it can gain Go Again. So let's say Go Again is 1. So this still comes down to 8. Hopefully you're starting to get what I'm getting at. So when I found out about this rule, it was actually pretty interesting to me, because this rule even works for some cards you wouldn't really expect it to work. Like Crippling Crush. 11 plus 3 is 14, plus 1 is 15, minus 7 is 8. That's pretty cool. Now, Crippling Crush also has a really good on-hit effect, or like a crush effect. And this also has some value, of course, but we'll get to that in a later part of the video. It also works for the card Pulverize, which I found really interesting. 14 plus 3 is 17, plus 1 for the pitch is 18, minus 10 is still 8. That's so cool. Pulverize. Now, also Pulverize is an on-hit and a heave cost, which is worth something, but we'll get at that. Now, this rule also makes sense for Phantasm, only with some added steps. So Phantasm cards are often a little bit above normal cards. So for example, Enigma Chimera has 8 power, plus 3 is 11, plus 1 pitch is 12, minus 2 is 10. So this is not 8, so it's a little bit better than a normal card. However, it has Phantasm, so if you block it with an attack X card with 6 or more power, it gets destroyed. So that's a pretty real downside to a normal card. So how do we balance that? We balance the equation by giving it minus 2 if it has Phantasm. So 8 plus 3 plus 1 equals 12, minus 2 is 10 from the cost. And then Phantasm, also minus 2, is 8. So let's show another example of this. Herald of Protection. So it should come down to 10, and then minus 2 for the Phantasm. So 7 plus 3 is 10, plus 1 from the pitch is 11, minus 2 from the 2 cost is 9. However, it gets an on-hit Spectral Shield token, so that prevents 1 damage, so that's 1. So that's 10. Minus 2, because that's Phantasm, is still 8. So take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, because a spectral shield is not always like one. It could do other things with luminaris. So, but the baseline for the Flesh and Blood card design should be 8. So let's expand on this theory or formula a bit, and let me tell you why you should care about this as a competitive Flesh and Blood player. So let's go back to the term rate. If you would attack with this card, you would pitch a blue and then attack for 7. So you use 2 cards to attack for 7. So 7 divided by 2, that's 3.5. So that's the term rate. This card has a rate of 3.5 per card. So now the question I was interested in. What is above rate? What is below rate? What is rate? What is the average rate of a card? So to find this out, you could do this by adding all actions of all cards performed together and then divide that by all the number of actions. So let's keep pitching away for a second. So whenever you would attack with a card, like you would attack with this card that had a rate of 3.5, if you block with this card, that would be a rate of 3. So if you add all those together and then divide those by the number of actions you added together, you should get the average rate of a card. So of course this equation is like impossible to do, but it was interesting to me nonetheless to think about it a bit. So when talking a bit to people about this, we found out, or we like had a guesstimate of the average rate per card is a little bit above 3. So it's not 4, it's not 3, it's a little bit in between. Because the floor of a card is always 3, not always, but 3 blocks is 3. And it can only go up if you attack. For example, if you attack with this card, it's 3.5. So the first thing about rate should already come to mind. Like, the conclusion you can draw with this card is attacking with this card is better than blocking with this card, because if you block with it, you only get 3 points of value. However, if you attack with it, you get 3.5 points of value per card. So that's really interesting to you. So now we have discussed 2 things. So rate, the average rate of a card being a little bit above 3, and the equation of a card that comes down to 8. So the equation that comes down to 8, you could say that is like the design philosophy of Flesh and Blood, or like the flexibility of a card. And the rate is very useful to you when playing the cards. So why? Because with the rate you can find out which cards are above rate, below rate, and cards that are above rate, so above that a little bit more than 3, should be good. So let's look at an example of this. Card Lava Burst. So normally this would attack for 2, which is like below rate. That's terrible. However, if you play it as Chain Link 4 or higher, it gains +3, that's 5. It is a bit of a tough demand though. But 5 is way more than, a little bit more than 3. So that's extremely above rate. So this card should be incredible. Also, if you then look at the flexibility of the card, like it would be 5 plus 3 is 8, plus 1 is 9. So that would mean it's incredibly good. So with some extra steps you could find out that other cards are also pretty good. So we've determined the average rate of a card is a little bit above 3. So let's take a look at the card Shakedown. So how Uzuri would play this card is they would play Attack with Stealth, that's 1 card. Then they would use Uzuri's ability to put this in, so that's 2 cards. So 2 cards, 6. So that's 3, so it should be a little bit on the rate. However, if you've activated an attack reaction, this Chain Link, you can banish a card from the opponent's hand with this card. And we know that the average rate of a card is a little bit above 3. So if this card would hit, that means it would be above 9. So 9 for 2 cards, that's more, that's 4.5 per card you use this. So this card should also be pretty good. And it is. So this equation, or this rate idea, it should work most of the time. Now, we have only looked at attack actions so far for this example. And we haven't really looked at the other cards Flesh and Blood has to offer. So let's do that for a minute. For example, the cards seen below. So in the equation that comes down to 8, this card, it doesn't work with this at all. You have 4 plus 1, that's 5. That's not 8. So we already can find out from that this card's not so flexible. However, when it's used for its specific use, which is defending, it will always defend for 4. And you can put a card from your hand on the bottom of your deck, then draw a card. So that also adds a little bit of flexibility to it. But already 4 should mean it's above rate. So this card should be really good for the purpose it's designed to do, but be a little bit less flexible. And this checks out. Now you also have Stein's response. This card is really good at the thing it's supposed to do. You can do like you can pitch a blue card and it defends for 7. So that's 3.5 per card. And then you still have 1 resource floating. And with Ultim that could mean Rampart, so it would be 4 per card. So that's really good. And then it also has an additional effect, or a more flexibility to the card, which you could pay 4 extra and then it defends for 3 more. So this just goes to show like how cards are designed and what makes them good. And some cards are less flexible than others, but they are good at what they are good at. Now let's quickly check attack reactions. So this also works. Blocks 2, it's not good at blocking, not so good at pitching, but when you play it on an attack action card that costs 2 or greater, it gains +4 and you get a discard on hit. So that would be really good. So let's not count it for now because it's just good. Now we do enter a bit of unknown territory with the rate, and that is that sometimes the rate of a card isn't really predetermined. And a good example of this is the card Command and Conquer. So is this card good or not? It really depends. If you would do the flexibility test on it, 6 plus 3 is 9, plus 1 is 10, minus 2 is 8. So this card is as flexible as a card should be. However, it has 2 added effects. Defense reaction cards can't be played, so it decreases the flexibility of other cards. That's really strong. And if it hits a hero, you destroy all cards in their arsenal. So that's also pretty scary. However, if you block this card with 2 cards, beyond it doesn't happen. So then it would just be like it would just be a normal card. However, you don't always want to block with 2 cards when you see these cards in front of you. I think you've experienced that before. Like I've seen a Command and Conquer and was like, I want to keep my arsenal and I don't want to block either. So this card is very annoying. So what this essentially means is the card has more value than you think at face value, and this is where like the skill part of the game really comes into play. So you can count this, so you can count the arsenal is like 3, and if you would block with your cards, your total value in your hand would be less. You can count it precisely, but in the end it would just say this card is a little bit better than it is at face value. So another card that really does this is Snatch. So Snatch is 1 card 4, so that's above rate, and on it draws another card. So it has a potential of reaching up to 7 value. Because the average rate of a card is a little bit above 3. However, if you block it, it's just a normal 4. So Most of the time when people see these cards, they'll just block them and they'll be normal cards. But the act of blocking is like a forcing play from your opponent in that case. So this is where the game really gets interesting, and this is where you can make the decisions that put the game into your favor or in your opponent's favor if you make the wrong decisions. So this really makes the game interesting, and this is where you as a player get to use your skill to determine what is a better play. So something I advise if you're trying to get better is just to count the actions you perform during the game. And like, if you'd block with this card, would that mean you get more value out of it or not? Or if you attack with this card, would it mean you add value to it or not? Like, try to count and play your cards in a way that they retain the most value. That is like the basic of the game. If you're trying to improve, it can really help if you just get back to that counting. What is better? Now there's layers on top of the game, but that's a good basis. Now let's get back a bit and talk about non-attack actions quickly. So non-attack actions, they shouldn't come down to 8, but around 6 or 7. So this 2 plus 1 is 3, plus 3 is 6. However, the rune chance tokens do arcane, so that's a little bit better than normal damage, since they are harder to prevent. Nimblism, 2 plus 1 plus 3 is 6, with a little bit of restriction, but it does have go again. So yeah, there's that. Now, Voltic Bolt, 5 plus 3 plus 1 is 9, minus 2 is 7, so a little bit less, but it's arcane damage, which is hard to prevent. And then you have a good example of good non-attack action that is above rate. You all know it, Revel in Runeblood. Especially in Fistfight is really strong, because you get 5 rune chance if you have played a non-attack before it, and you've mostly played that. So that means 5 arcane. So this card is really strong. Now let's get back again to the thing about rate and how you can determine what's a good play and what's above rate and what's below rate. So one really interesting thing is illusionist cards. Now illusionist cards are very interesting because their value or rate really depends on the other player. Am I right? For example, Invoke Chromai, it blocks 3, so that's okay. If it attacks, or Release the Arena, you get 1 action point, it attacks for 3. So that's 3, it takes 2 life minimum to kill, so that's, forget about the Ash for a minute, so that's, let's say, 5 for 1 card, that's already pretty good. However, it has Phantasm, so that makes it a little bit worse. However, if it stays in the arena and the opponent just decides not to kill it, this card can become broken, because you can just keep attacking with it over and over and over, netting you an extreme amount of value each turn. So illusionist cards are really difficult for the opponent to play against, and also a bit for you to when to play them, how good they are. So illusionist is a little bit of a harder class to play, I would say. So let's calm down for a second, and this rate idea and all these numbers, and sometimes they just don't make sense at all. Like with the card Remembrance, like 2 pitch 2. Wait, what? That's not 8. That's like doesn't block. It just shuffles 3 action cards from your graveyard in your deck. Like, huh? What does this do? However, if you play Dromai or you've played a little bit of Fatigue Ultim, this card can still be really good. So the game's super complex, and this like heuristic is like you can forget about it sometimes, because sometimes it just doesn't make sense. However, if you look at all like the banned cards, you can see like a pattern in them. So let's take a look at one of the first cards. So to finish out the rate question and the rate discussion and what's on rate and what's below rate. Let's take a look at the banned cards. So the first card, Winter's Will. You pitch one card for 4 and get a frostbite on hit. And this is a weapon, so you don't need to draw it. You have access to it every turn. So 4 every turn, that's above rate. Frostbite on hit, that's like 5. So 5 every turn. It cripples aggro decks that play 0 costs. This card is extremely above rate. And access to it every turn, it's banned. Another card, Belittle. So this card would just give you an extra card. 1 for 3 go again. If you, of course, you had to review a card, so it was a little bit demanding. But then you get an extra 3 attack for free. So that this would mean like playing 1 card, 3 attacks, you would get an extra 3 attacks. So it was like playing a 1 go again cost for 6 attack. That's extremely good. Or you would get the blue one. So then it would just net you resources. You would gain resources by playing it, because it would cost you 1 resource, but then you would get a blue, so you'd net 2. So okay, Belittle was a little bit too good, and they banned it too. Well, this just interesting to me. Let's count this card out. It's not banned. It's just interesting to me. It's an interesting card to me. Don't you think this card is interesting? Codex of Frailty. So, how can we assign value to these kind of things? Alright. Each hero puts an attack action card from their graveyard face down in their arsenal. So most of the time this would be a 0 cost arrow or another arrow. Let's say 0 cost arrow for ease, that would be 4. So that's already 4. A little bit demanding because you need to have the arrow in the graveyard, sure. So it's already 4. Each hero that does discards a card. So if your opponent has no cards in arsenal, they get to discard a card. So average value of card is 3. So that's already 7. However, we look at it at its optimal place in the game. So optimal is your opponent doesn't have cards. That's already 7. Alright. Create a ponder token under your control and a frailty token under each opponent's control. So ponder, let's say it's average of 3. So 7 plus 3 is 10. Okay. And a frailty token under each opponent's control. So let's say the opponent plays Kodachis. So that frailty would mean 2 less damage. So let's add 2 to the 10. What? That's 12? Wait, what? Why is this card 12? And it's just 1 card. Isn't like Reveling Room lot 5 for 1 card at its best? Well, never mind. Like I said, rate is a difficult thing. Let's not care about it too much. So, thank you so much for watching if you've made it to the end. I know I've been a little bit fake sometimes, and this concept is pretty fake sometimes to explain. But I definitely could have done some things better. But if you've watched to the end, thank you for watching. I hope this had some enlightenment to some of you, or just you could learn something of this. I really hope that. That was my goal of the video. So thank you for watching, and if you would like more of this kind of strategy, general strategy content, or like level up content, please subscribe and like the video, and maybe see you at the next one.